This is the Famous Roots podcast. I am joined here with Vincent Paterson. So I appreciate you coming out and attending and joining me for this podcast and interview. So definitely honored to have you on.
Thanks, Eric.
Just kind of want to get into it a little bit on kind of the intros a bit and kind of just talk about your background and we'll kind of get into more of the deeper stuff.
So,
So take it away.
what would you like to hear?
Kind of like your startup of like early childhood, kind of getting into your pathway of choreography and acting, and kind of who you are now.
Oh, wow. Okay.
A
Well,
jam-packed answer, right?
I grew up in a quite a poor family of five kids, and we lived in a very industrial area
Hmm.
in the outside of Philadelphia, Pennsylvania, along the Delaware River. And there weren't a lot of dreams there. People either wound up graduating from high school, not going to college, working at the oil refineries or um, funeral homes or any kind of local business. And I just never saw myself doing that. I had a very challenging family life. My father was an alcoholic, and it was a lot of constant battles in our home and didn't make for a pleasant home life. So I found escape in the junior high and high school acting uh, classes and after school activities, and I really loved that because I could be kind of a character and step outside of my real life and step into somebody else's life and live that fantasy, and I really enjoyed that. And so I thought, this is very, very interesting. I did really well in school because I wanted to go to college, and we didn't have money, and I knew I would need scholarships. But when I went to school, I went to a college named Dickinson College in Carlisle, Pennsylvania, beautiful old college. And my initial desire was to become a lawyer because I thought, oh, I could be a great trial lawyer. I love to act and I'm intelligent, and this would be great. It would be lucrative. I could make money for the first time in my life. Well, that was a great idea until I auditioned for the school's plays, and I got in my freshman year, which I was not supposed to, but I was a pretty good actor, and I became addicted once again, and I dropped the law courses and I just concentrated on drama in different languages and things like this, and I really really loved it. I wound up not only acting there but starting my own theater company for the school, and also because I wanted to stay at that school, they didn't have a theater major, so they allowed me to create the first theater major at Dickinson College. So that was a joy. When I got out of there, I acted in Society Hill Playhouse in Philadelphia for a little
Hmm.
while. And then a girlfriend of mine, we both kind of hated the East Coast. And she said, listen, I'm interested in moving west. Do you want to go? And I said, oh, baby, I'm in the car. So we traveled around. We traveled through the South for a while, stopped at a couple places. We wanted to be someplace warm and had some friends in Tucson, Arizona. And I said, I think maybe we'll stop here for a while. And we did. She decided to keep on moving after a little while, but I loved Tucson. It was the desert. I had never experienced anything like that. I mean, especially you guys, you're from Chicago, and I'm back from way east. So, we're filled with greenery
Hmm.
everywhere and rain and seasons. And Arizona was just
Hot.
absolutely awesome to me. The colors of the desert, and
Hmm.
how when it rained you could stand there and smell the rain coming across, and see it as it came and wet you and kept on going. It
Hmm.
was just a phenomenal experience for me. Um, I had never danced. My dad was a social dance teacher. So from the time I was little, I knew like little steps, like the cha cha and the mambo and things like this, but I never had considered dance something that I was going to become involved with. Um, but I always thought theater would somehow be part of my life. But one day, I was passing a ballet studio in Tucson, and I heard this music, and I opened up the door, and there was a woman teaching girls ballet from maybe they were 9 to 16 years old. And the lady said, "Can I help you?" And I said, "Well, I was thinking of doing something like this for exercise. I've always been a theater mole, and I really need to kind of do some exercise here." And she said, well, we don't really have adult classes, but you could do a class like this. I thought, what the hell, I'll do it. That's great. Sure, why not? Well, it was super fun and very positive and supportive for me because I was already an actor. I was older. I was 23, 23 and a half, and I could lift the girls, and they were very happy. And it was very, very positive experience. So I wound up kind of dedicating all my time to learning how to dance, predominantly taking ballet classes and some modern classes, some jazz classes, and I would come back and forth to LA from Tucson when I could to study with some great teachers out here. Um, I was in a relationship and my partner was murdered. And I had to make a decision if I wanted to stay in Tucson or if I wanted to get out. And I thought, this is a perfect opportunity to leave all that behind and move on.
Mm-hmm.
And so I came to LA. And interesting point, I had gone to see a psychic prior to coming out here. And he told me some very fascinating things. One of them being that I was going to move to a coast. He didn't say where. He also said, I don't know what you do or your interests are, but whatever it is, when you move, you're going to be like a woman having a baby, struggling, or for me, struggling for 9 months. And then around the ninth month, something's going to change for you. And then he said also, and I really don't know about your profession, but ultimately you're going to become a director. And I don't know a director of what, but I'm hearing director. So that's kind of what happened, which is so interesting. I came out here in January. I struggled and I struggled and I took class and class and auditions and auditions. And I got my first gig in September. So that was the first kind of, okay, wow. And now looking back on my life, I went from actor to stage director to dancer to choreographer to director and wound up being a director, as this
Awesome.
man said. So it was pretty interesting, that whole journey. Anyway, I'm here and I've had a illustrious and enjoyable career.
That's
And
incredible.
and I think I'll stop and you can keep on asking me another question.
No, that's incredible. Thank you for that. Is out of kind of going off of what you just mentioned about kind of the people you connected with, were there any of those or people further on in your career, were any of them pivotal mentors or early influencers that shaped your like creative philosophy in acting or dance?
Yeah, I always believe that life throws us mentors, and if we're wise enough to accept their knowledge, we can really gain from it and grow
Mm-hmm.
volumes. The first person that came into my life was a man named David Brubaker. He was the head of the theater department at Dickinson College, and he was the first. My father really wasn't much of an influence on me in a positive way. Mr. Brubaker, David, was a fantastic paternal influence and believed in me, encouraged me to follow my dreams, and it made me believe that I had talent in the theater, especially. And I was very grateful for him. But along the way, there have been other people. The woman that I first took ballet class with, Stephanie Steigers, back in Tucson, was also very supportive and sweet to me. And when I came here, there were several dance teachers who became very close friends. Bill and Jackie Landrum. Uh, they basically taught me a lot about contemporary dance, and a man named Michael Peters, who I danced next to,
Mm-hmm.
wound up being a dear, dear friend and kind of led me into the world of Michael Jackson.
Yeah, awesome. And what was like the first break in the entertainment world for you? Like once you got into it, um, because you've, like you said, you've worked with some great pieces of material, but also with great, influencers and celebrities. So out of all of that, what was your first break in the entertainment industry?
Well, I guess the first break would have to be as a dancer because that's kind of how it all began out
Mm-hmm.
here. And I was I didn't have any money. I was down to $35. I was living in an apartment in the middle of Hollywood, kind of right down the street from where I live now, but
Okay.
a little different. And I was basically living with a generous man who was a ex-Vietnam vet, and a white female hooker and her two poodles. And I had a little space in the living room on a sleeping bag, and I had a duffel bag, and that's all I owned. So I ran out of money. I hadn't eaten in a couple days, and I actually had $35 left. That was it. But a friend of mine who was not a dancer, but I had met him. He was a nice guy, and he took me out to dinner, and there was a sign that said "waiter wanted," and I thought, okay, I guess I'm not going to dance anymore. I'm going to be a waiter. That was lunch. They told me I had to come back for dinner, so I went to take what I thought was my last dance class. And this choreographer called and said, hey, listen, I need another guy for a TV show, and I got your name from another choreographer. Can I come and watch you in class? I said, of course, please, begged him. He came and watched me for about 20 minutes and pulled me out and gave me my first gig, which was just a CBS television special starring Dick Van Dyke.
Okay.
But that was kind of my foray into the world of dance here in Los Angeles. And then from there, I went to gig to gig to gig to gig and no gig and gig and no gig and gig as it goes. And I did really well as a dancer, and I toured the world with Shirley MacLaine and did a few other wonderful jobs. And then MTV came out, and Michael Peters, who was a friend of mine who I had danced with and who I was dancing for in class and assisting him in class, got a gig choreographing Beat It. And he told me that he couldn't give me the job, but if I wanted to come and audition, that I could. So I went to audition, and having been an actor, this is the interesting part, having been an actor, I came in character, and I knew it was about gangs, so, I let my beard grow, and I had an earring in my ear, and I wore jeans, and I can't remember what else I had, but all the other guys came as dancers, and stretched, neon-colored stretch tops and leg warmers. And so when I came into the room, I saw Michael Jackson immediately looking at me. Well, obviously, because I looked the part, but I could dance. I could really dance, and especially Michael Peters' choreography. And I just kept seeing Michael Jackson talking to Michael Peters and kind of pointing at me, but they didn't select anybody at the time. When I got home, I asked Michael Peters, I called him up, what happened? He goes, oh, why don't you come on over to the house? And he sounded quite depressed. And I thought, oh, damn, I guess I didn't get it. And I went in there, and he said, well, doll, Miss Thing, you got the gig, and you're going to be a gang leader, and I'm going to be the other gang leader. And I thought, this is fantastic, And that was kind of my first big break into that world of MTV, And then from there, I did so many projects.
Yeah, no, that's awesome. And then because you just mentioning how all the positive you went through, of course, and you even mentioned all the challenges you went through, how do you, how should I say it? How did you overcome all of that challenges to become who you are now for, all the work that you've put in? There's so much that you've definitely gained out of it, but also kind of went through, like you said, on a gig, off a gig, certain things like just from the startup, and I guess in a lack of a better phrase, you kind of built it from within. You weren't, always into dancing. So you said you started off as acting, and then dancing kind of came in afterwards. So kind of building it off your own and learning from others and learning it within. Would you say like that was a hard challenge for yourself, or were there other pieces that came into the puzzle that made it a little bit more difficult on your journey?
Well, my father left when we were all kind of young, so I became independent early, and my mom had to work, and she wasn't well, so I had to take care of the three brothers and a sister. So I already had kind of grown up prematurely and lived a lot, followed my own rules. Nobody helped me go to college when we didn't have any money. So everything I did for myself. So that kind of makes you stronger and braver to step out into the world and try things for yourself. But I've always been somebody who's kind of listened to that inner voice in me, and it's really served me well, whether it's about something positive or something negative. And it's funny, people say, what inner voice? And I say, okay, I'll give you an example. And this is a very simple example. You you have a glass of water or something and you set it down on the edge of the table, and this voice says to you, don't sit that glass there because you're going to knock it over. And you don't pay attention and you walk away and you come back and you turn around and bang, you knock the glass over, you know. I mean, we all have a voice inside if we listen. And I pay attention to that voice, and I often question myself to be sure that if I'm stepping into something new, or I'm going to take on a gig, or step away from a gig, um, I really go inside and contemplate this, and and try to figure out the pluses and minuses, and try to be true to my heart. Actually, you know, what do I feel as well as what do I sense? What do I hear the voice saying? What feels right to me? Um, and that's just kind of the way I've lived my life, you
Mm-hmm.
know. So sometimes I would take a job, even um, if uh, if it seemed risky or tentative, to see that, to challenge myself and step forward that way. And oftentimes something inside would say, "This is not the right gig. Don't do it. Only negative things are going to happen," and I would step away. So. Um, People would think I was crazy at time to turn down things, but you know, when you come from a world where you're really, really poor, you know that you're probably never going to be that poor again. So everything was a step up. Everything was a positive move
Mm-hmm.
for me,
Awesome.
um, and it was all about people. You know, I wanted to be sure that the people that I collaborated with, whether I was dancing for them or choreographing for them or directing them, um, that I liked who they were, that they inspired me, and that I felt comfortable in collaboration with them, um, so that not only I could do my best work, but I could give them their best work.
Mm-hmm.
So,
Yeah.
yeah.
No, incredible. So would you say, staying on the topic of like choreography,
Hmm.
do you do like choreography for the audience in mind, or do you focus more on like the artist's expressions?
Oh, totally the artist.
Yeah.
Yeah, you know, you have to be a chameleon. So, I mean, just take three different people that I did a lot of work for: Michael Jackson, Madonna, and Björk. You know, each one of them moves completely differently
Oh yeah.
than the other. So I would kind of step into their body in a way. Um, Michael Jackson told me on the first gig I worked with him, he gave me a piece of music to Smooth Criminal that wasn't complete, and he said, listen to the music, listen to the music a lot, and let the music tell you what it wants to be. Don't force your ideas on this music. And I took that as a rule, basically, from there on out in everything that I choreographed. And then I would, if it was for Michael, I would go into a studio by myself. I would listen and listen and listen and listen, then go into a studio by myself and work it out on my body, but kind of stepping into their body,
Right.
and hoping that that worked for them, and realizing what their strengths and their um, weaknesses were,
Mm-hmm.
basically. So I would never have given Michael leaps across the room or something, because that wasn't something that he was familiar
Right.
with. The same thing with Madonna. Now, she was a lot more flexible because she had training as a dancer, but you know, it was, she moved, her body moved in a different way, different, totally different than Michael. Then when I worked with Björk, Björk had really no dance training, so you know, she was like this incredible, almost robotic. I used to call her my Icelandic Teletubby. You know, she was this sweet, adorable woman, and you know, she could pick up things fast, but they had to be very simplistic and more pedestrian movements. You know, so yeah, I get inspired by who that person is, who that personality is, and let them kind of come into my world, the idea of them come into my world, so that I can
Tell the
let it
story.
go all around
Mm-hmm.
and come back out as
Right.
something specific for them, not the audience,
Mm-hmm.
for them.
Right. No, that's awesome. And so, of all your favorite collaborations
Oh
or
God.
pieces of work, right, that do you, I would say, do you have a favorite collaboration or a piece of work that still emotionally like resonates with you, whether it's with Bjork or Michael Jackson or Madonna?
You know, I I put myself 1,000% into whatever I'm doing.
Mm-hmm.
I don't care if it's like there's a Russian school for young dancers, young actors, and I'll go over there, and these kids are anywhere from like 6 to 15 years old, and I will commit to them as much as I do if I'm doing a gig for Michael Jackson. So,
That's an awesome mindset to
you
have.
know, it's I I love almost everything I've ever done. You know, a few projects didn't work out and I walked away from them, but I guess my favorite projects off the top of my head would be Smooth Criminal for Michael Jackson,
Mhm.
um, changing the face of the Super Bowl with Michael Jackson, um, the film Dancer in the Dark that I did with Björk and Lars von Trier,
Mhm.
and with Madonna, well, the Blond Ambition tour because we changed the face of pop tours, but also I created a piece for her based on the movement from Vogue, and I conceived her as Marie Antoinette, and I'm really proud of that piece.
Yeah.
So
That's awesome.
maybe I would say those four pieces.
Yeah. Yeah. No, that's, I mean, those are massive pieces too. That so.
Thanks. You don't think that when you're in it, you know.
No, right?
You're just doing it. You're happy to be there at the moment. You
Right.
don't think about how many people are going to see it or how grand a project it is. You're
Mhm.
just happy to be in the room with the creative people who really want to work.
No,
You
of
know.
course. And when it does happen like that, though, right? When you do something like Smooth Criminal, to see how much it's fully influenced the world. You know, people know the lean.
Yeah.
And it's probably maybe a little bit of a touchy subject. I know you've talked about in other interviews, but it's like, you know, people don't realize how much work you yourself put into all that. You know, they associate not like as a dig or anything about like the artists themselves having it, but it's like without that portion of it or part of it, there wouldn't be the Michael Jackson lean.
Exactly.
So, you know, it's kind of like that. What is the credit isn't there,
Yeah.
right? So, you know, and like I said, you've talked about before that it's kind of a bummer, in a lack of a better phrase,
Yeah.
of like saying, you know, you haven't, the work that you put in isn't recognized by everybody as
Right.
saying. And how does that, you know, kind of going on that, how does that like, does
Well,
it kind of affect you in a certain way? Or do you know, in the inside of you, it's like, you know, yes, but that work is, if it wasn't for myself, that piece wouldn't be out there.
right. Things are slowly changing. When I started choreographing and MTV was young,
Mm-hmm.
the people behind the celebrities didn't want the public to know that the celebrity didn't make every decision
Right.
that involved anything about them, whether it was what they wore, whether it was what they sang, whether it was what they danced. And so they kind of created this fantasy that Madonna, Michael Jackson, whomever, you know, did it all themselves.
Mm-hmm.
Um, as time has gone on, thank God, and choreography has become a much more respected and art, and also something that people are more aware
Yeah.
about the reality of what choreography is, things have slightly changed. So
Mm-hmm.
now you have um, Mandy Moore, who did L.A. I can't remember the name, but and many films and projects, or Kenny Ortega, and these guys' names are beginning to be household
That's
words,
right.
you know,
Mm-hmm.
because the people that work with them aren't trying to pretend that they're the choreographers as well, you
Mm-hmm.
know, and so that's been a good thing. The only other thing has been that choreographers are just not recognized in this business out here. And we have started to create a union now called the Choreographers Guild. And slowly that's becoming a powerful union,
Mm-hmm.
not completely accepted yet by IATSE and others,
Right.
but it's moving more positively every single year. So it's only maybe 2 years old now. So we're hoping that that will bring a lot more recognition for all choreographers.
Right.
And also that what we have to do, it's always been a work for hire, which means that as an artist, I always, if I wanted to work with Michael Jackson, I had to give the rights away to my work. If I wanted to work with Madonna, I had to give the rights away to my work,
Mm-hmm.
which means I could never put up a concert or an evening of my work because I didn't own anything.
Right.
I gave it all away and I had no option. It was either do this, sign this contract, or don't work. So that's one thing that we're hopefully eliminating from the electronic world. The electronic
Mm-hmm.
media is this work for hire clause.
Yeah. Would you say that, and this is kind of an outside question, but kind of leaning towards it because of all the work, are a lot of choreographers, are they freelance ones, or are they more so like part, like you said, there's now the unions that are coming in, like in your time, where they're more organized choreographers, or are they more freelance at that time? And then nowadays, is it the same kind of situation? Are they more freelance, or are they organized now?
Well, the only organization is that hopefully we'll be able to lay some ground rules down that
Okay.
that might eventually give choreographers health, pension, and welfare, credit for their work,
Mm-hmm.
and partial ownership, at least, of their work.
Right.
But everybody's a freelancer.
Okay.
You're all independent. You
Mm-hmm.
have agents now, which didn't exist when I began, but now there are several agents in Los Angeles and other cities. I think Chicago
Oh
now,
yeah.
and Miami, Atlanta, New York. All the bigger cities in the country have dance agencies that represent both dancers and choreographers, and some directors as
Mm-hmm.
well. Um, yeah, but we're all freelancers basically. We all work independently.
Okay. Interesting. And one thing I do want to ask too is like, how do you find the balance between like the precision of your work versus like more of like the spontaneous like movements in it? When you do something like Smooth Criminal, when a piece gets brought to you and says, "Hey, I want you to tell the story. I want you to create it." Um, how do you balance yourself from, okay, this is my, the precision that I want out of it, or this is more so like free flowing with it? Do you have like, like you said, you have that talking, that voice in your head that talks, but how do you kind of decipher which route you're going to take?
I rarely take a free flowing route.
Uh,
I'm very specific with everything I've ever designed, um, with especially with choreography. With
hmm
directing, it's a little bit different
Right.
working with actors, but with choreography, I pretty much always only gave anybody what I could do with my own body.
hmm
Now, I was never a gymnast, so as things progressed, I would say, "Can you show me a couple tricks or something?" And
Right.
I might integrate that. But no, I would everything that I gave, I created on my own body, and then worked and worked and worked in rehearsal. So the precision was so clean that it then felt oftentimes that it was organic and
hmm
it was just made up, especially with someone like a Michael Jackson. I
hmm
would give Michael Jackson movement and then he would go into a room and work by himself or in front of a mirror and do the same 8 counts for a
Right.
very long time until it felt like it just came out of his body, which is another reason why so many of his fans thought that he created everything.
hmm
But the way we would work together is I would create anything that had another person involved, another dancer involved. Anytime he was doing something totally solo, that was him. He would create his own movement and bring that to the project. So that's how we collaborated that
Awesome.
way.
Oh, that's
But no, I'm not one for free flowing movement. That's not my style. My work is very, very precise. And even though at times, like for instance, if you ever see Dancer in the Dark and you see some of the pieces I directed and choreographed for Björk, they almost look like she's making it up because that's what I hope the choreography feels like, that
hmm
it's organic, that it's
hmm
not um, improvised, that it is precise, but it's relaxed and powerful in its own way.
Awesome. And from all the work that you've done, obviously every piece is a little bit different.
Yeah.
So would you say like one piece took longer than others? Or there's some that you got like a work brought to you and you're like, okay, we got this done in like a couple months. Like every piece is of course different, but like what is typically like the time framing from start to finish on all of this?
Well, the people, those of us here on the West Coast have always envied those choreographers back on the East Coast who work on Broadway because you go to Broadway and you've got weeks and weeks to create a number. I mean, I've been called by directors when I was choreographing who were doing a commercial, an incredible director named Joe Pitka, one of the most famous commercial directors we've ever had in the States. He'd call me up and say, "Vince, what are you doing?" "Nothing." "Come on down, get 15 dancers and bring them down. I need to put them in a commercial today." And I what? And I'd call up my friends and bring them down and create something. "Well, what are we doing, Joe?" "Well, you got to do something here with a marching band. And okay, all right, and put that together in an hour and a half or 20 minutes. So, and then Smooth Criminal, we keep coming back to that, but that was a luxury. Michael was recording his album, and
hmm
I think from the beginning of my first rehearsals to the time we finished, that was maybe 5 or 6 weeks.
Oh
But
wow.
it was also because it was originally just to be a short film, but then became part of Moonwalker,
hmm
and that changed things. And I would shoot a little bit, and I would go to Michael's house, and I would show him what I was doing, and he would go. I started out with 10 dancers, and he would say, "Oh, I love that, you know, and I think you need more dancers, don't you?" And I go, "Yeah, Mike, sure, I'll take some more dancers. Get 10 more dancers," and then I would do that, and then I would come back and show him what I was doing. "Oh, Vince, I think you need some more dancers, and don't you need some more music?" "Yeah, Mike, yeah." So a 4-minute piece with 10 dancers turned into a 10-minute piece with nearly 60 dancers, I think. So that was a real luxury. It
Wow.
usually doesn't work that way. I
Hmm.
mean, when I put the Blonde Ambition tour together, for instance, for Madonna, she had already hired somebody else and let them go. She wasn't happy with the work they were doing, I guess. But so she had already hired the dancers, and I came in and I had 21 days to create 18 pieces, not only just the choreography, but the concept and
Hmm.
everything behind them. So that was a madhouse. I mean, I would listen to the music all night long with a recorded loop in my head, get up, and the vision was right in front of my face. And
Hmm.
I would run down the street to the Alley Cat Studios. And when
How do you break that off though with 18 pieces? Like how if every day's
that's what I would do, one piece in the nighttime, I would listen to just that song. And like I said, I would visualize it in my head when I woke. I would run down, I would get in front of the mirror, I would put the movement on myself. My two assistants would come in, I would teach them everything, and then I would step back and watch them finesse things a little bit
Hmm.
if I didn't like what I saw. Then the dancers would come in, I would teach them. Madonna would come in, I'd teach her. We'd work and work or work that day, learn everything. Next day, rehearse that, start the next piece. It was absolutely insane. I don't know how it happened. I don't know how it went through me. I often say that I feel like I stick my finger into the electric socket of creativity, and I get that jolt.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't know where it comes from.
Hmm.
I don't know. It's some kind of magic that happens,
Wow.
and I'm always grateful. I'm
Right.
always grateful.
Right, right. Is there a difference, in a feeling of your work and putting in all the time and effort into a piece, directing something for Madonna or with Bjork, or directing like opera? You did like Viva
Mm.
Elvis, like the shows there.
Yeah, Cirque show.
Yeah, like all of that. How different is that directing from that part to directing with a show like that?
Yeah. Every project is different, really. I mean, you work in genres, whether it's live theater, like Viva Elvis, or a pop tour.
Hmm.
Is similar to that kind of thing. Except, well, Cirque du Soleil, you work on it for
Right.
years. You have that
Right.
luxury. Um, but everything is different. Commercials happen very quickly.
Hmm.
Music videos happened a little bit faster, and pop tours happen a little bit faster
Yeah.
than that. So it depends. It truly is. You bring your same essence to every project. Hopefully, you bring
Hmm.
your truth and your joy and your um, pleasant outlook. I hope to try to make it, as comfortable for these celebrities as you possibly
Right.
can. Because what you realize is, you know, from the outside, it looks really cool to be one of these celebrities. From the inside, it's a frightening situation.
Hmm.
Um, they have no freedom. They've sacrificed their freedom for fame, and that's the truth. And um, so I try to let them always know that I'm not there to get anything from them other than this incredible collaboration which we will have. I try to keep everything focused, and at the same time create a space where we can all crack up and laugh our asses off, and then get right back to work,
Yeah.
and also create a place where people can feel comfortable making mistakes,
Right.
to not be judged. um, I'm there, especially with celebrities, to make them look as good as they can, not to make me look as good as I can, but that they look their best.
Right.
So I always say, look, this is what I think it should be. If you have another thought, let me know. And that rarely ever happened. Every once in a while, Michael would say, "Oh, I feel this on another beat, Vince. I feel it over here." I was like, "Great, let's change it to that." Man, it's your music.
Hmm.
So if you feel the beat here, let's take that beat.
Right.
Um, but no, when you get the opportunity, and they're not many, when you're working at that caliber. But when you get that opportunity, you want to take every moment and make it just so joyful, not only for selfishly for yourself,
Mm-hmm.
but for the celebrity, give them that wonderful opportunity to relax and have a good time
Right.
because they don't always have that.
Right.
And also with the dancers, give them the opportunity too to have a great time
Mm-hmm.
and to bring out the best. That's what I really enjoy doing the most. Bring out the best in every one of them.
And it shows in all of your work, of course. So,
Thanks, Eric.
and for, going back to my original question in the beginning where I mentioned, like, is it, the artist or is it the audience? So when you did a lot of the work with like the Cirque shows, kind of going on that, obviously, would that be the same situation that's more for the artist, or is it still the same case on that part, or would it be more so for the audience as well?
Well, I mean, ultimately, you don't exclude the audience from
Right,
anything.
right.
So, I mean, and I'll go back to Michael for a minute. Every time I would create something, his first response was, "The fans are going to love this. The
Mm-hmm.
fans are going to love this. That's what we do it for, Vincent. We do it for the fans, you know." So, everything we knew would be going to, we knew who would be
Right.
watching. Um, like, for instance, when I was first approached by the people at Cirque du Soleil, they told me, "We want just a dance show." I said, "No, you don't." "Yeah, we just want a dance show, nothing but dance." I said, "Trust me, you don't want a dance show. You have an audience that they want a certain thing from you."
Mm-hmm.
I said, "We can certainly incorporate dance into a project, but you don't want a dance show." Unfortunately, what happened is they kept forcing me to put more and more dance in the show. And then when the show opened, the people that came to see the show kept saying, "What's the dance about? Why is there so much dance? This is
Mm-hmm.
Cirque du Soleil."
Mm-hmm.
So then they kept taking my dance out and adding acrobatic acts, which they had the right to do with under the contract. But, so there you're dealing with the
Right.
audience. But I always feel that you have to please yourself first, and then second are the performers because um, they're the ones who are creating the magic. They're the ones I step away and it's all in their hands. And then third is the audience. So
Right.
that's kind of the way I've always looked at it. Please myself first, be sure I'm happy with what I've created. Be sure that the celebrity is happy or the dancers or the acrobats are happy with what we're creating together.
Mm-hmm.
And third, that it works for the audience.
Would you say that that's kind of that part right there influences like your directory approach to your work?
Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely. In a little bit, you
Awesome.
know. I try to create something that will either let people see the world in a different way, um, might even change them a little bit, or that when they leave the theater or turn off the TV, that something inside of them has altered a little bit in a positive way, and hoping that that creates a small like ripple in the waters of the world
Mm-hmm.
and makes the world a little bit better place to be.
Yeah. Okay. How often do you look back at your work? Do you still sometimes like, any tapes of them and seeing everything? Do you kind of just rewatch and like, oh yeah, this is, I could change something nowadays, or is
You
everything
know,
perfect as it is?
the reality, I've never wanted to change anything that
Okay.
I've done. I've never gone back and said, darn, I wish I could do something
Right.
different." No, I've always been really
Really?
happy with the results
Awesome.
of everything, pretty much. Again, there's a couple projects that I had to walk away from,
Mm-hmm.
even though, which was very rare, or else tell the person in charge, whether that was another director and I was choreographing, that they would be giving me problems, and I would say, for whatever reason, "Listen, I'm here for you, but if that doesn't work for you, I'm fine saying
Yeah.
adios, man."
Right.
And they always wound up seeing things from a different perspective and
Right.
keeping me on. So that was the good part. But you got to be. You're an artist, and part of that is being true to your heart and your soul. And if you start sacrificing that or um, putting your heart and soul in a precarious situation, your art loses its value and
Mm-hmm.
its purity.
Mm-hmm.
So I've tried to be conscious of that as all the time, I think.
Yeah. No, of course. And those pieces that you mentioned that you walked away from, was it more so because of the like there was a butting head approach to it,
Mm.
or is it more so like there wasn't a lot of free will and creativity that you were able to bring into it? Like what
Yeah,
was kind of, I mean, you don't have to get super into the details, but like kind of just saying like what were kind of the reasons as to, this isn't what
yeah.
I don't want to put my name on or put my work into it.
Well, there were really only two big projects that happened like that for me. One was the movie Evita, and Alan Parker, the director, had asked me to be part of it. It wasn't that Madonna had asked me, Alan Parker did. And I knew how to work with Madonna already. You have to befriend the celebrities without and make them feel comfortable knowing that you don't want anything from them
Right,
other than
right.
their best performance. And so, I would hang out with Madonna and we would go to restaurants and stuff in Argentina. And Alan Parker got really jealous. And he pulled me into the office and he said that he thought I was trying to overstep my bounds as a choreographer and that I was stepping in between him and Madonna. And I basically just said, Alan, you're the one who asked me to do this gig. I did it because you asked me to do it. Madonna never asked me. And I said, I also know how to work with Madonna. And there's certain things that you have to do, certain things that she respects and certain ways that she likes to work. And
Mm-hmm.
part of that is becoming intimate, becoming friends while you're doing it. And I said, but listen, man, if you're uncomfortable with me being here, I can get on another plane. I said, we're still in pre-production. You can
Mm-hmm.
bring in somebody else. And something you just have to stand up for yourself
Yeah.
and tell the truth, and he was fine. He acquiesced. He said, "I'm so sorry, man. I get it, and please stay." So that was one. The other was "Kiss of the Spider Woman" with Hal Prince, and I don't know. It was a very strange situation. He didn't seem to like what I was creating, and one day called me into the office, and I was working on a project, one of the pieces, and I was working. I had started work with Cheetah Rivera, who was the star of the show, and then she went off on the weekend to perform, and I was in the beginning stages of another piece for the other star of the show. And when she came back, I wanted to finish that piece with with the other star of the show,
Mm-hmm.
and I asked Cheetah if it was okay if my assistant went in and reviewed some of the work that we had already done, and she said fine. At the end of the day, Hal Prince called me in the office and said, "You're horrible. You're totally unprofessional. If I wanted the kind of shit that you're throwing out, I would have hired, and I'm not going to say who because she's a friend of mine, but you know, uh, after this, I want you. I'm going to fire you. I don't want you to be part of
Wow.
this." And I said, "I'm sorry, Mr. Prince." I said, I asked Cheetah about this before I gave that rehearsal for her, and I said, "But you know what? I just have to tell you, even though I think you are a master, more people have seen my work than all your work combined." And he went furious. And basically, I thought his head was going to blow off. But I had to stand up for
Of
myself,
course. Of
and
course.
I was only being truthful and I was only being honest.
Mm-hmm.
But, I mean, come on, two people in the entire career I've had, that's
Right.
pretty great. I mean,
Right.
those odds are pretty darn good.
And
Most,
speak.
most people are really good and most
Yeah.
people really want to do something positive.
Right.
So,
No, of course. And speaking about, the longevity that you had, when you look at the pop choreography today, do you see your influence being reflected on it now?
Sometimes I do. Dance has changed a lot with the kind of advent of hip hop
Mm-hmm.
and street. Things have changed quite a
Right.
bit. Um, Personally, and I don't know. People always go, "Oh, you're old now, so you don't like it the same way." I'm a storyteller, and I'm a storyteller whether I'm a director or whether I'm a choreographer. And I don't see a lot of storytelling anymore through dance. I don't mean that you don't have to go from A to B to C
Right.
to Z to Z. I'm just talking about something that's narrative that we can relate to. Um, Once hip hop came onto the scene, and I love hip hop,
Mm-hmm.
and I think there's some amazing street dancers that are brilliant, brilliant, brilliant people, artists, and but it choreography now tends to look more like aerobic class. It's just one movement after the next, after the
Right.
next, after the next. Nothing repeats itself. I came from a world where dance and choreography was similar to the creation of a piece of music. You had verses and you had choruses. And so you didn't feel bad to repeat movement
Mm-hmm.
because, first of all, your audience could pick it up. And second of all, it just kind of flowed with the structure of the music that you were creating to. That doesn't really happen much anymore.
Right.
It's a lot of one piece of one kind of movement, and then another step, and then another step, and another step, and another step. Very little repeats, and there's not very many ups and downs, which I find emotionally works much better in choreography.
Okay.
My
Oh.
own opinion.
um, and then kind of staying on the same topic, but like, has aging changed the way you view movement? Obviously, like you said, like when it comes to trends now, like what's happening now is different than what happened 20 years ago.
Hmm.
Um, yeah, and for your own body's relationship to choreography, like, as somebody gets older and they're still in the industry trying to still work with it, is it harder for them to keep up with the movements, or is it something that is instilled in them? Like, would they be able to kind of keep up with like current trends?
It depends. Choreographers work in very many different
Mm-hmm.
ways. You know, there are many choreographers who don't really choreograph the steps. They bring in
Okay.
a group of assistants and they have the assistants create the choreography. And then
Okay.
they, as a choreographer, they piece things together. They
Right.
piece
The
the
puzzle.
steps
Mm-hmm.
together as a puzzle. Um, I never worked that way. Mine, like I said, I created every step that I did.
Mm-hmm.
So, in fact, the last piece I did was the musical Evita that I did in Vienna. And I had debated at that time whether I felt that I could choreograph it or not because of my age and my body and my limitations. So I thought, let me give it a shot. I hired a wonderful woman, Barbara Tartaglia from Italy, who came in to help me. And she was a really strong, is a very strong dancer. She can do men's work and women's work. And so I felt much more comfortable because for the first time, I would do what I could do. And then, excuse me, when it came to a point where I couldn't do it, I would say, this is what I have in mind.
Right.
Can you try it and let me see if it works? Especially work that would go down to the ground and back up and down to the ground and back up quickly. Um, but now I don't choreograph anymore.
Yeah.
I my body doesn't can't handle it, and I'm 75 years old, and grateful that I'm still physically healthy.
Mm-hmm.
But you know, I don't want to tempt the fates. You know, I don't want to tempt the fates. I'm happy where I am. You know,
How do you feel about the rise of TikTok dance? You know, culturally,
Eh,
do you think it elevates or dilutes it a little bit?
a little bit of both.
Yeah.
You know, look, to me, I love dance, you
Mm-hmm.
know, and anytime dance is out there in the world, it makes people happy. It
Right.
makes people smile. People don't get sad because they're dancing. People
Mm-hmm.
don't get angry because they're
They
dancing.
feel spirit free
So,
will.
you
Yeah.
know, I love the fact that TikTok is there. And I love that there's these little mini pieces of choreography that millions of people, if not
Mm-hmm.
billions of people, learn. I mean, it puts a smile on their face and it puts a smile in my heart.
Right.
So, yes, I think it's a wonderful thing.
um, and then you've worked in everything from Broadway to opera to film, right? How does your creative process change across each format? You know, from, and we kind of a little bit discussed it
Yeah.
through, but you know, the true collaborations that every piece you've worked with, is there a big change across each one, or is it kind of like you said, it's mainly working with the actors and the dancers themselves?
Uh, Let me see. There's a little bit of change, um, but you basically keep the same thing going throughout. You
Mm-hmm.
know, I mean, you know the each genre has a different structure in rehearsal, from
Right.
beginning of rehearsal to performance. So you have to kind of follow that guide.
Yeah.
If you're creating something for a music video, whether you're directing or choreographing, it's very different than if you're doing something for an opera with a
Right.
huge symphony in front of you. You know, very, very different. So you follow certain rules, but then on the other hand, you have to be able to adjust.
Mm-hmm.
And fortunately for me, I've been able to cross all these different genres because I came from the acting world into the dance world, into choreography, back
Right.
to directing again. So I've had a little opportunity to taste all of those
Right.
beautiful art forms and be able to incorporate them or integrate them as much as I can into every project that I do.
All right. Awesome. And then what did you say? There's a harder genre to work apart? Like if it's hip hop, like music wise, hip hop to pop to rock or something like that. Would you say one genre is harder than the other to work and put your pieces together
For
in?
me,
Yes.
no,
No, they all
no.
kind of flow together
They're
on
all a
that.
little different, you
Yeah.
know. I mean, I'm certainly I don't do hip hop. I never really
Right.
learned hip hop. I came a little bit too early for that, and you know, and I was never a major ballet dancer, but I've
Hmm.
choreographed ballets or elements of ballet. Um, but no, they're all interesting. It's really me challenging myself. What can I do that I've never done before? How can I be inventive in a new way? How can I
Hmm.
bring something to the public that they've never seen, but that they'll always remember?
Right.
You know, consequently, and also because of inspired by the artist, like you
Hmm.
mentioned, the Lean and Smooth Criminal. Well, Michael Jackson loved crazy stuff like that, you know. So I would try to incorporate um, little elements that I knew would thrill him and excite
A
him.
little bit of crazy in there, right?
Yeah, like at the very first moment when he walks in the door and he flips the coin across the room, he was like, oh, I love that, or the lean, he loved that. I mean,
Hmm.
so I like to do that, I like to please them, and make them happy
Right.
as well. So
Awesome. If there's an artist nowadays, if you were still actively working,
Gaga,
Gaga,
mm,
I had a feeling you were going to
Gaga.
say that, but I just wanted to make
Mm.
sure.
I almost had an opportunity to work with her.
Really?
I can't remember what show it was, but she did a tribute to David Bowie,
Okay.
and I think it may have been the Grammys. And I was working in Europe, and she called my agent to see if I could come in and do that with her, create that piece, and I couldn't. And I never heard from her again,
Oh,
unfortunately. But she has an amazing team
oh
around
yeah.
her anyway. But I think she's so talented
Hmm.
and versatile,
Oh yeah.
and somebody who I would love to have or have had the opportunity to play with. Yeah,
That's awesome.
absolutely.
Absolutely. No, that would have been incredible too. And she's done probably just as, big shows too,
Yeah,
from the Super Bowl all the way
yeah.
down. So
And there's a
definitely.
choreographer who I think is really exceptional. His name's Damien Jallet,
Hmm.
and he's from no, he's from Amsterdam area, Belgium or Amsterdam. I'm not quite sure, but he's such a talented guy. And I recently contacted him because he choreographed the movie Amelia Perez,
Okay.
and I thought it was fascinating what he did. And it reminded me also, I wonder if he was inspired by what I did in Dancer in the Dark, because that was pedestrian movement that turned into movement,
Hmm.
And he wrote me back saying like, "Oh my God, you were my first teacher. The work you did for Madonna and Michael Jackson. It's like I learned all those moves, and that's how I learned to dance." And I was so thrilled, and found out that he choreographed most of the celebration tour for Madonna. He had done other tours for
Mm.
Madonna. I had no idea. So he was great, and I love at this point to be able to contact people like that, and the special joy and happiness of realizing that in some small way I touched them and
Right.
inspired them,
Right.
and I don't know, it just makes me feel so great.
That's awesome. So, would you say from having a conversation like that, would you say there's certain qualities that a choreographer should have or to make them a truly great director too? Because obviously, like you said, he's learned from you, he's picked up on pieces on stuff. So, what qualities in choreography kind of provides that trait
Yeah.
into being a good director? Is there something specific on that nature, or is it kind of more so um, just how do I want to say it? Like a not trait, but kind of like a movement type. Like if there's something specific, like
Yeah.
everybody has a different touch on their work.
Right.
So if one person sees your work, it's hard to instill the same qualities because
Hmm.
it's not coming from you; it's coming
Hmm.
from somebody else. So I guess I wanted to say like, would it be harder to emulate the same, or is it easier to kind of pick up on that stuff?
Well, not every choreographer wants to be a director. First
Right.
of all, I mean, they're
That's
happy
true.
staying in the world of dance,
That's true.
and not, so it's so personal,
Hmm.
honestly. It's every single artist is different. I, for me, I picked up so much of my knowledge from uh, really watching the great directors that I've had the opportunity to work
Right.
with, whether it was Mike Nichols or Spielberg or Joe Pitka,
Mhm,
the
mhm.
commercial director I
Yeah.
mentioned, um, Alan Parker, even, these are great directors who've done great
Oh,
work.
yeah.
And I've always, from the beginning, allowed myself to be a fly on the wall. So if I'm in a commercial, doing a commercial, and they don't need me on the set right now, I'd still stay on the set and watch
Just
everything
to
that's
pick
going on,
pieces, yeah.
understand who the players are, understand what they do, watch Joe to see what his eye does.
Mhm.
Would I do the same thing? Would I do
Right.
something different? How does the camera move?
Right, right, right.
And fortunately, I've been with some amazing directors who have appreciated and respected the work that I've done and allowed me to be by their side through the whole entire thing. Mike Nichols on the film Birdcage, The
Mhm.
Birdcage. I mean, he brought me in from the very first table read with the cast and kept me there through the entire film, saying, Vincent, any place you think that you could throw something in there, just come up and tell me and we'll do it. So all these places where there wasn't supposed to be movement, I created things like the crazy scene that Robin Williams does with Fosse, 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 Michael Kidd, Michael Kidd, Michael Kidd. That was not his improv. That was he pulled me behind the set and he said, Vince, I'm so tired of playing the straight gay man. I've got to do something funny. I've got to do something funny. Can you come up with something funny for me? And I said, Robin, give me 5 minutes. Go do the take and run back afterwards. And he did. He came back behind the set, and I showed him this history of dance in 30 seconds. And he went on to do that. And the funny thing was, what happened was he did it the first time, and everybody cracked up, so they couldn't keep that take, you know. And Mike Nichols said, "What is this? What is this, Robin?" And Robin goes, "Oh, well, that's something that Vincent created." And Michael said, and Mike Nichols said, "Well, I love it. It's very, very funny, but let's do the script as Elaine wrote it." And Robin got down on his hands and knees and crawled across the floor to Mike, and he goes, "Oh, Mike, please let's shoot it. Please let's shoot it." And Mike said, "All right, guys, look, boys," he said, he calls them boys. We'll do it as it's written, and then when I've got it, we'll do a couple takes of this, but I can't promise you that's going to be in the movie. Well, the beautiful thing is that more people, when you say birdcage, so many people go, Fosse, 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 Michael Kidd, Michael Kidd. So, it's those kind of spontaneous moments that you never expected, but
when
they
you,
happen.
like you said, you touch the electrical outlet.
Exactly, boom, there it goes, zoop, and it comes out. So, art is magic sometimes, if you're honest and you're sincere and I think that you're only there for the good of the situation, inspiration hits you.
Right.
Inspiration hits you.
Right. And so what's one thing that like audiences might not realize about how and what goes into large scale like dance productions? Would you say there's something for, that not like the average person like me would realize, hey, there's a lot more than just what you see on screen.
Absolutely. Well, first of all, the amount of rehearsal that goes into something.
Absolutely.
And I remember, I brought different people who knew nothing about the entertainment business, and I brought them down to watch a filming of something. And they never had any idea that you have to change camera angles and change lighting for every shot and all of this. And I think that's something that's really fun for me to watch people learn, that they're, oh my gosh, I thought you just come out and do it and one camera shoots it and that's what it is, So that's always a joy to introduce people to the world behind the scenes.
Because there's so much that a lot of people don't realize.
So much.
And it's like we've been saying, there's pieces and work and hours and sweat and blood put into all this. So definitely,
Absolutely.
And now kind of shifting gears to your book, definitely want to touch up on this. And so you wrote a book about 2 summers ago, you said. So what compelled you to write Icons and Instincts? So kind of if you'd like to share a little bit about it.
Yeah, briefly, there was a documentary that was done about me in Sweden called The Man Behind the Throne. They showed it at LACMA here, and a woman came up and suggested I write a book, and I told her I didn't know how to write, and she said, well, first of all, you're a choreographer, so you're a writer, because what it says in a script is, and then they dance, and then it's up to you to create whatever you're going to create, so you're basically writing. But I had some journals, and I showed her some journals. I said, I'm not a writer, and she looked at the work, and she said, you're a writer. You write your story. And I said, well, if you'll do it with me, Amy. So my friend now, dear friend and co-writer, Amy Tofty, and I put the book together. But it was not just to talk about what I've done, but it was really, and I hope it does, and I've been told it has, inspired young artists to follow their hearts and to be honest and truthful in their introspection of who they are as an artist. But that anything can happen if your intentions are pure, if you really are talented, and if you listen to the advice of those people that love you and who will tell you the truth about the things that they think you're doing correctly or incorrectly, or the path that you're taking, is it the right one for you or not? And that's what my book is really about. It's not only about the behind the scenes and the fun of the creations of the people, so that these fans would know that these celebrities are people, not just stars, but they're real human people. And I wanted to share that, not as a gossip rag, but as real, honest, wonderful human beings.
Right.
And also to inspire young artists and push people to get into their art and to trust that if they're faithful to themselves and if their heart is good and if they don't try to step on other people to get where they go,
Mm-hmm.
it can pretty much happen for you.
Oh yeah. What surprised you most when you saw your life story and everything that you shared in this book kind of laid out on page? What was like the most surprising piece of it all?
I don't think it was surprising. I think it was contentment. I think it
Okay.
was joy. I was happy with what we did. I was happy with the stories that I share. I felt that they were really heartfelt and honest
Oh
and
yeah.
pure.
Oh
And I've been told by this, I don't want to get emotional in this interview. I always get emotional. I always cry. But you know, beautiful thing is I've received a lot of messages from a lot of young gay guys who said that had they not learned my choreography for Madonna or Michael Jackson, they were so suppressed or oppressed by their parents and friends when they wanted to come out that they would have committed suicide, and that damn, my
yeah.
choreography saved their lives.
Oh, so
And
awesome.
there's nothing better than that.
No, of course. I was gonna say it's literally touches the heart, of course.
Nothing better than that.
So absolutely, you've inspired a lot. You've touched a lot of people's lives. You've gone through and made a huge impact. No, as big and as small as it is, right? So definitely huge, huge work. And then just basically one big thing I want to take is like a big takeaway from your book that you want readers to know about when they read your book, when they hear about your story. Is there something that there's a big key takeaway that you want everybody to know?
I think the most important thing is that anybody can do what I did, you know.
Mm-hmm.
Um, Now, of course, you need the fates to be on your side and you need
Absolutely.
opportunities to present themselves to you. But if you continue along the path that I try to propose in my book about trusting yourself and your
Mm-hmm.
instincts,
Mm-hmm.
listening to that voice inside, then hopefully your dreams can come true as much as mine did.
Right. No, that's incredible. I appreciate everything. Obviously, this was an incredible interview. Having the chance to talk with you, your life stories, your background, the work you've done, the inspiration, and the compelling stories that you've touched on. Not only just everyone you've worked with, but everybody on the outside that's been able to hear your story and read it. I appreciate everything for sure. Is there anything that you want to share on the outside that we haven't been able to touch on?
No, I just want to say thank you for being
Oh,
interested in what I've
absolutely.
done and interested in me and giving me the opportunity to have this wonderful conversation with
Absolutely.
you.
I was super honored. And when I thought about it, and I was like, this is the perfect person that I want on this podcast. Like,
Oh,
I
thank
looked
you.
through it all and I was like, I was bragging about it when I got your information and you were like, yeah, let's do it. And I went straight to my wife and I was like, this is awesome. I was like, I am so stoked for this.
Thank you, man.
So
Thank you
I
very
appreciate it so much. Thank you so much for being on the show. And, this was a huge honor. So
Great.
thank you so much, Vincent.